So how do you design the perfect segment or bit for your next presentation? Well, there's 4 simple steps, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. Hey folks, Marcus Sheridan here. Love talking about this subject of preparing your next great presentation. And one of the mistakes that people make, I think, is they oftentimes try to prepare this long presentation, but in reality, what we should prepare is segments or bits. And the cool thing about that, if we do that, we can interchange them and use them at different times or different talks or different presentations in the future. But how do you design that segment? Well, there's 4 parts, and if you use these 4 parts, if you follow this, you'll find that it's easier and it's powerful and it works. So part number 1, question. Start your segments with a question. Why with a question? Because the idea is that the audience immediately gets in a state of reflection. So you've heard me talk about the Columbus principle before, and the idea of always trying to get the audience to discover for themselves what we're trying to tell them without us actually telling them. Yeah, makes a big difference. And so when we start a segment off with a question, especially a question of self-reflection, the audience has to think about that. And now it puts themselves in this mood of, how do I behave? What do I want in that situation? So you start with the question. Number 2, now we lead into a story. Now the story is the principle of the thing that we're trying to get across. The story is that journey that helps them understand clearly, okay, this is what this segment is all about. Here's what it looks like when I put it into action. Now, the third part, after we've done the question, after we've done the story, is we have the challenge or the payoff or the big moment or the climax, the result of the thing. What happened because of that story? In other words, because they took these actions, what happens next? And then finally, number 4, we challenge them. So they just heard us. We asked them a question, they thought about it for themselves, and then they imagined it in action with a real story, and they saw the result of it. And so now's the point when we challenge them to take action on what we just said. So a really quick example of that, you may have heard me talk about the importance of at least discussing the costs and prices of our services or products on our websites before. And so how I would start that is, I would start with a question like, so have any of you in the room over the last year or 2 researched online how much something costs? Yeah, so that might be my first question. Now, it could lead to other questions, but it gets them thinking about the process of when they research how much something costs and the experience they have. And so I'm going to ask them a series of questions about it. Then I will tell them about how we did a full article and video on how much does a swimming pool or fiberglass pool cost for our company. So we discussed how we wrote that and how we talked about how it has ranges and goes up and down and what makes companies expensive and what makes companies cheap, da-da-da-da. And then the result was, in our case, that one article generated over $5 million in sales. So when I show that $5 million, it hits the audience, it sticks with them and says, geez, wow, impact. And then finally, we'll challenge the audience and say something like, so is it possible for you to talk a lot more on your website about cost and price? Now, that whole segment takes about 20 minutes, so I skipped a whole bunch there. But I want you to see the format. This format works. I've replicated it again and again with so many other presenters. Question, story, result, challenge. And if you follow this pattern, you're going to design great segments that move, that impact, that persuade, which that's the idea that we have as presenters. And it's going to make you dramatically more effective, whether on the stage or in the boardroom or whether you're in a sales presentation. It works. Look, if you enjoyed this, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Otherwise, my friends, let's get to work.